Hey everyone, I'm back from my little pre-Dataslate hiatus with a new video for you today. Today we got the new balanced Dataslate for Warhammer 40k, and I wanted to give you my breakdown of my thoughts on the changes as someone who got their degree in game design. Now, I'm not going to be looking at any of the points changes or things like that because there's a lot of them. It'd make the video get way too long, but I wanted to talk about the things that are in the balanced Dataslate itself. Now, before we get into most of the changes that are going to be happening for this balanced data slate, I want to talk about one of the previous balanced data slates that I'm still not happy exists in its current format. The stratagems that are revolved around being able to be used more than once per phase or per turn. I don't like that this was left completely untouched. In my opinion, it does more harm than good, as armies with powerful battle tactic stratagems are left mostly fine, and armies without good battle tactic stratagems are going to struggle with this kind of army rule. It's also very clearly a design space problem when we look at armies like AdMech that have actually zero battle tactics in their Skitarii detachment. When we compare that with how Grey Knights had been operating, where they had a 2 CP battle tactic stratagem, we can see how big of a difference that is. In my opinion, this would be substantially better as a rule that was just reduce the command point cost of a stratagem by 1. It still makes 1 CP stratagems free, it makes 2 CP stratagems still have a cost even if you want to use them multiple times. It would allow different armies to be able to do different things and still be able to have those really cool toolkits in their toolbox. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the specific data slate changes for different factions. To start off, the Sisters of Battle. The Triumph of St. Catherine nerf is pretty good. I still like that it keeps the flavor of extra miracles without being able to necessarily break the game with tons of miracle dice chaining. It is a little bit of a snub, and I think that it will hurt some of the Sisters of Battle competitive ability and integrity, but I think that overall the army will still be fine. You just won't be able to have one unit go full hog. You're going to have to spread those miracles out across more sisters. Now, when we look at the Custodes changes, I have almost no notes. It is exactly how I think Custodes should have been fixed. When you took Custodes and you took their detachment rule and made it so that it only worked on mortal wounds, but then devastating wounds weren't mortal wounds anymore, I mentioned in that previous Custodes video that I did how bad their detachment rule had become. This change does fix that. It would have been nice to see them make it a universal rule for armies that ignore mortals, as units without this detachment rule that have a mortal feel no pain of X plus rule have effectively a dead rule. Now, because I do mostly play Tau, I'm going to use the broadside as an example, but the broadside has a 4-up feel no pain against mortals. That is kind of not even a rule at this point in the game, and so it would have been nice to be able to see that get touched up, since GW clearly thinks it's a problem that Custodes had, but they didn't want to address it as a global game issue. I also like that they kept the smaller squad sizes for Custodes, as a 10-man brick of Custodes are just impossible for some armies to get rid of efficiently, and Custodes are so elite that having a bunch of smaller strike squads for them just feels a lot better in my head. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that these super hyper elite soldiers would need to be grouped up in groups of 10 in order to get their job done. Instead, being able to go off in groups of 4 to 5 to be able to get a task done efficiently just makes more sense thematically. Now, when we move over and we look at the Eldar, I'm actually going to be kind of a naysayer of these changes just a little bit. Eldari really is kind of a mixed bag that really did need to get some serious rules changes, but some of them were a little heavy-handed despite how oppressive Eldar were. To start off, I don't like the change that they did to Fate Dice. Having only 6 Fate Dice instead of 12 makes your army rule feel so much worse. I understand that 12 Fate Dice working as they currently were was too powerful, and Eldar still have tools in their army that can generate extra Fate Dice. But I would have preferred to have seen them take something like dice that you use from your Fate Dice count as modified rolls so that they couldn't trigger things like lethal hits, sustained hits, or dev wounds, but they would still be able to give the Eldar good options defensively and for critical advances or charges that they just had to hit. The other thing is that the Phantasm change is just kind of okay. Moving d6 inches is a huge nerf from moving a flat static 7 inches, and it still doesn't completely fix the problem of them being able to move after everything else is done. I really would have preferred to have seen it be changed to still being, say, 7 inches, maybe you could move it down to 5 or 6, but having them only be able to move after an enemy unit moves within 9 inches of the target infantry unit. That way, it can't be used at the end of the movement phase. It can't be used as that counteractive, haha, you thought you could shoot me, but now you can't. Instead, making it kind of a game of chicken where the Eldar player has to decide when the best time to use it is. The rest of the changes that Eldar have are all pretty good in my opinion, though. Fate's Messenger change is great. It lines up to be closer with the way that it works for other factions units, such as the Thousand Suns Infernal Master. The Night Spinner change is amazing. Adding a penalty to charge rolls will continue to help protect Eldar frontline units from charges, and it doesn't remove the ability to advance at all. You still won't advance if you rolled only a 1 or a 2 on your advance roll, but you can at least have a good chance of moving. The Wraithguard change is great. It makes it more in line with other units that also have shoot back abilities, and I really love the Incarn change. It was far too mobile for what it was able to do by being able to teleport into an enemy gun line during the shooting phase, fight, and then teleport out by having another unit die during the fight phase and still be able to keep that unit safe. Overall, I feel like this was a very good direction for Eldar, but it was a little uninspiring on some of the changes, and that brought the overall positivity down for me. As we move over and look at the changes that the Astromit Har receives, I think it was a good clarity change. Lowering the amount of overall orders but increasing the ability to get orders out makes a lot of sense for the army, especially when you think about how command phase abilities work if things are in transport. It reminds me a lot of the way that the 9th edition Guard Codex handled it, and I really liked the way that that book handled orders in vehicles. The Blood Angels change was definitely needed, and it is going to be a serious boost to their damage on the charge, as the Gladius attachment is just better right now in general. So if you actually take the Blood Angels attachment, you're going to be rewarded. With that said, +2 strength isn't bad, but I would have really preferred to have seen something like a +1 strength, +1 AP, and +1 attacks instead. The strength does make some very crucial breakpoints. For example, if you're running with Power Fists or Thunder Hammers, you're going to be more powerful into transports and vehicles, as most of them are around T9, T10, and that's going to really make it so that you can either wound on a 3 or a 4 substantially easier. But I don't know, just something about the +2 strength I don't quite love. Now, as we go take a look at Chaos Demons, this might be my bias as a Thousand Suns player who really likes the Changeling, but I just don't like the way that this is being handled. I recognize that some armies were abusing things like Nurglings and Changelings, Blue Scribes, and whatnot in order to get really good, cheap units that were great objective holders or secondary mission players, but the unit that abused this the most, in my opinion, was the Nurgling, which was seeing a lot of play in Chaos Space Marines and in Death Guard. But it's battle line, and so it doesn't take away anything from that being used as that kind of tool. Instead, it's going to take away flavor from World Eaters, Thousand Suns, and Death Guard in general, especially when you consider the maximum point that you are allowed to take of a Chaos detachment inside of your Chaos Space Marine or Chaos Space Marine adjacent subfaction. This is a couple quick examples. If Emperor's Children do get their codex in this edition like we're expecting to, right now they physically wouldn't be able to take Shalaxi Hellbane in their army, as she's 450 points and a Demonette is 110. That comes out to 560 points, which is well over the 500 point limit of what you are allowed to take as a supplement to your army. It also means that you can't do something like fitting a thick city style of Death Guard with 2 great unclean ones, as you would also have to run 2 units of Nurglings, which is going to put you at 540 points of Nurgle units in your army. Overall, I feel like this change was mostly unnecessary. Yeah, there were a lot of Chaos armies that were souping demons, but that's kind of the appeal of a Chaos army, is getting to use cool Chaos demons and Chaos knights in your army as soup, and being able to have that more diverse army choice. That's part of why you picked Chaos over the Imperium. Now, as we head over towards the Chaos Space Marines, I think that these are great changes. There's almost nothing here that I actually dislike. The change to transports requiring the same mark of Chaos is a little odd in the Chaos Undivided faction, but it is a necessary change for the game's health. Having a maximum damage mark unit inside of a maximum defense mark transport was simply unfair game design. The change to Dark Obscuration is also a great change. Making vehicles have the lone op equivalent was simply too much. Now you can actually get reasonably close without getting yourself instantly killed in return. There are a lot more weapons and profiles that are viable at 18 inches than there are at 12 inches, and it's a lot safer to get those gunline units up to that 18 inches than to that 12 inches where they would have been at risk of a charge from the previous turn. Additionally, Profane Zeal was just way too good. It's still going to be very good with a full reroll of wounds, but it's at least not the best stratagem in the game anymore. At 1 CP, it was kind of absurd. Finally, Accursed Cultist having OC1 feels a lot more in line with other non-battle line infantry units, and their regeneration being tied to their own command phase means that it's still going to be very good, but it will be far less oppressive. We're looking at a potential difference of 12 wounds to the unit over the course of 4 turns, given that they could regenerate 3 wounds in both players' turns. The Death Guard changes are pretty meh. Putrefiers throwing less grenades is whatever. It's still good. It's still a good rule. Putrefiers are still going to be run, and the rest of the army is completely fine. Now, when it comes to the Drukhari, I really don't care if the new detachment is better or worse than the old one. I applaud GW for actually stepping it up and recognizing the old one just wasn't working. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know Drukhari anywhere near enough to give a full breakdown of the faction's new detachment, and that's also outside the scope of this video. But kudos to Games Workshop, you did a really good thing here. Now, when we go and we look at the Grey Knights, I love the changes that the Grey Knights got here. Giving the Dread Knights meaningful loadout changes to show off their status as highly trained Space Marines with improvements to their ability to hit on their melee is great. This is going to go a long way in helping Grey Knights with their problem of killing vehicles. On top of that, getting the Heavy Side Cannon to be AP2 and ignores cover is effectively a 2 AP buff on its old profile. There are actually reasons to take different loadouts now on the Dread Knights. I've been asking for Games Workshop to make these changes to plenty of units, and while I don't love that this is the only time it's done this data slate, I can appreciate that it was done at all. Now, the Haloed and Soulfire change is good, as 2 CP stratagems being free is too powerful, but I still don't like the way it's being handled. As I mentioned earlier, I would much rather have these types of abilities be the stratagem costs 1 CP less. Now, moving over to Imperial Knights, thank you GW for finally giving good clarity to Lalo the Tyrant, but please give Bondsmen back to Big Walkers. They're honestly probably fine after the changes that were received to Towering, and Imperial Knights should be able to bring their cool big knights and not feel bad about it. The Space Wolves change to Deeds Worthy of Saga is good, makes it trigger more easily, which is great, but it's still not going to be enough to make the detachment worth taking over the Gladius or Spearhead detachments. It's a great win for people who want to play the flavor of the army, but it's just not going to be powerful enough. And finally, looking at the World Eaters, the Berserker Glaive was definitely hands down the best enhancement in World Eaters. With that said, I think this was a little heavy-handed of a nerf. If it really felt like it needed to be changed, you could have very easily made it D3 extra attacks at +1 damage, as D3 damage is admittedly very spiky when you're adding it on to these kinds of profiles. Now, I do like the Favored of Khorne nerf, as it was too good at making your army feel super consistent. GW doesn't seem to like that this Yahtzee playing army was able to just force triples all the time. It's a change that makes sense. I'm glad to see it here because I do not like this army rule for World Eaters and I want to see it gone, but it's not a very fun change for World Eaters players themselves. This is just objectively a really powerful nerf. And finally, it's a nice buff to give the Demon Prince the possibility of making things have a 4-up invuln save, but it's still probably not going to see much play. Now, giving a very brief overview of the general points changes, we saw a lot of points nerfs in the field manual. The one thing that I want to bring up is how many armies in the middle of the pack saw adjustments where their most spammed units saw nerfs and some unseen units saw buffs. I would have liked for this to be more extreme with the units seeing no play whatsoever that were left completely untouched. Like, is anyone running Helldrakes? Why did they not get any points buffs? But it is a direction that I like, and I want to give credit where credit is due that they tried anything at all. Taking units like the Riptide and Tau, bringing it down 15 points, and then taking the spammed Crisis Suits and taking them back up 20, it's a solid change, and it makes Riptides feel more appealing. But I feel like a lot of those points changes could have been better handled by doing similar things as what they did with the Nemesis Dread Knight and giving units different profiles so they could actually fill different roles. The reason these units aren't seeing play isn't because they're too expensive, it's because other things just do their job better. But that's kind of everything that we had in the Balanced Dataslate and the field manual. Overall, I thought it was a good general direction. There's some really awesome standout changes to the rules. Some of the rules have some awkwardness to them, but it's overall a very solid change in terms of how the game is currently running. I'm also very glad to see GW trying new things and trying to actually balance this game around good game design. I'm a bit worried about Necrons right now, given that they just won LVO, they saw no nerfs, and every army that competed with them got nerfed. But I can at least understand not nerfing a codex right now, since it's brand new and you would want to have a little more data, but I would really be expecting to see some hotfix changes to them. Some changes that I would have liked to see weren't there, such as reduction in the Power of Thousand Suns attachment rule that would allow them to get more points decreases and give them the chance to effectively play the board. There are some things that I didn't like about the way that certain datasheets were left, but as far as what was shown, this was an overall good package. And I, again, have to applaud GW for taking a good step in the right direction. Now, the rest of the content is going to be coming out again pretty soon. There weren't too many changes to the Imperial Guard list because there was only the one nerf, so expect that to be coming out sometime in the next week. I also want to give a big thank you to everybody who has been watching and subscribing. We've managed to hit a milestone where now I can start to earn a little bit of money from YouTube, so thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. It's going to make it a little bit easier to spend some more time working on these videos. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.